I have been doing this job for 17 cycles now, and let me tell you something about ambushing cargo vessels in the Outer Rim territories. It is, without question, the easiest duty assignment in the entire Kaldreth Imperial fleet. You find some slow-moving transport, you fire a warning shot across their bow, they immediately cut their engines and start begging for mercy. Simple, clean, profitable. So when my sensor officer, Thalrix, announced that we had a human transport vessel on our scopes, I did not even bother getting up from my command chair. Humans, the galaxy's newest members, barely 200 cycles since first contact, and they already think they own half the trade routes, but their ships, laughably underarmed. Their crews, absolutely terrified of any real conflict. Intercept course, I said, examining my claws with theatrical boredom. Standard intimidation protocol. My bridge crew, all 12 of them, moved with practiced efficiency. The Razor Wing was not the biggest ship in our fleet, but she was fast, and her weapons systems could reduce a cargo hauler to scrap metal in under 30 seconds. Not that we ever needed to actually fire. The threat was always enough. The human vessel tried to run. They always try to run. It is almost adorable, really, watching them push their pathetic engines to maximum burn, as if that would somehow help them escape a military interceptor. We caught up to them in less than 4 minutes. "They're hailing us, Commander," Thalrix reported, his ear frills twitching with amusement. "Ignore it," I said, standing now and stretching my lower arms. "Disable their engine core. Gentle now, we want the cargo intact." Our gunner, Selprix, put a precision pulse shot right through their propulsion systems. Beautiful work, really. The human ship went dark, dead in space, exactly as planned. I could practically hear the panic screaming through their hull. "Boarding team with me," I announced, striding toward the docking bay with all the confidence of someone who had done this at least 300 times before. The boarding went exactly as expected. We cut through their airlock, stormed into their cargo bay with weapons raised and intimidating battle cries echoing off the walls, and found exactly one human standing there, hands raised, looking absolutely terrified. Wait, no, not terrified. That was my first mistake right there, though I did not realize it at the time. She was female, I think. Honestly, it is hard to tell with humans. They all look sort of the same to me, with their weird flat faces and their tiny little eyes and their bizarre skin that comes in all those different shades. This one had brown skin, dark hair pulled back in some sort of tail configuration, and she was wearing a gray jumpsuit that looked like standard civilian transport crew attire. "Please do not shoot," she said, her voice steady. Too steady. "I am unarmed." I laughed. Actually laughed. My boarding team joined in, because come on, this was just too perfect. One human, one single small fragile human, standing in an empty cargo bay, trying to negotiate with 8 fully armed Kaldreth warriors. "Search the ship," I ordered my team. "Find the cargo manifest and anything valuable. You," I pointed at the human with my pulse rifle, "are coming with me. Consider yourself a hostage, pending ransom negotiations with your pathetic Earth government." She nodded, still with that strange calm expression. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay," just like that. "Okay." As if being taken hostage by an alien military force was just another minor inconvenience in her day, like missing a transport connection or spilling her beverage. I should have known right then. I really truly should have known that something was very, very wrong with this entire situation, but no. I was too busy feeling smug and superior, already calculating the ransom value of a human prisoner in my head, thinking about the commendation I would receive from High Command. What an absolute idiot I was. We dragged her back to the Razor Wing, though dragged is probably the wrong word since she just walked along cooperatively, looking around at everything like she was on some sort of educational tour. My crew kept their weapons trained on her the entire time, but honestly she did not even seem to notice. I brought her directly to the command deck because I wanted my entire bridge crew to see this. A human prisoner. Physical proof of our successful raid. Plus, I will admit it, I enjoy the theater of these moments, the intimidation factor of having a captive surrounded by armed warriors, tactical displays, weapon systems. It usually breaks them pretty quickly. "Sit," I commanded, gesturing to the deck floor with my rifle. She sat, cross-legged, comfortable, like she was settling in for a casual conversation. I loomed over her, using my full height advantage. Kaldreth males stand nearly 8 feet tall, and I am considered large even by our standards. Humans are tiny. This one maybe came up to my mid-chest. The size difference alone should have had her trembling. "You will provide us with access codes to your vessel's cargo hold." I said, voice deep and threatening. You will also provide contact information for your employer or government representative who will negotiate your ransom. Refuse, and things will become very unpleasant for you. She looked up at me, tilted her head slightly and said, the cargo hold is empty. The ship was returning from a delivery run, and I do not really have an employer in the traditional sense. Do not lie to me, human. I snarled, leaning down so my face was closer to hers. My fangs are quite impressive when I bear them properly. We scanned your vessel. It is registered as a military transport. Oh yeah, she said, nodding like this explained everything. But we use them for all sorts of things. Cargo, personnel transport, supply runs, whatever needs moving really. Military transport. She just admitted it was military, but she was completely alone, unarmed, and acting like this was perfectly normal. Thalrix leaned over from his sensor station. Commander, her vessel has military-grade shield generators and reinforced hull plating, but no weapons systems installed. It is very strange. See, the human said helpfully. Just a transport. Nothing exciting. I felt my jaw clenching, which is never a good sign. This was not going according to standard procedure. Hostages are supposed to be afraid. They are supposed to beg, or cry, or at least show some basic survival instinct. This human was acting like she was answering questions at a social gathering. What is your name? I demanded. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Torres, she said immediately. United Earth Defense Force Fleet Logistics Division. Lieutenant Commander. A military officer. My brain stuttered over that information for a moment, trying to reconcile it with the completely non-threatening person sitting on my deck floor. Prove it, I said. Identification. Now. She reached slowly into her jumpsuit pocket, pulled out a small rectangular card and held it up. Here you go. I snatched it from her hand, ready to examine whatever pathetic credential she was offering. That card. That stupid, innocent-looking plastic card. That was the exact moment my very bad day began. The card was small, lightweight, made of some kind of laminated plastic material. It had her picture on it, looking slightly younger and substantially more serious than the relaxed person sitting on my deck. There was text printed in human standard language which my translator implant handled automatically. Name Torres Rebecca Ann. Rank Lieutenant Commander. Service number. Some long string of digits that meant nothing to me. Organization. United Earth Defense Force. I turned it over. More text. Blood type, whatever that meant. Issue date. Expiration date. A magnetic strip and some kind of chip embedded in the plastic. This is it? I said, holding up the card with obvious disdain. This flimsy piece of plastic is your official military credential? Yep, she said cheerfully. That is it. Although technically I also have a biometric profile in the system, but you probably cannot access that from here. I stared at the card again, looking for anything that would explain why this human seemed so completely unbothered by her current situation. Military rank meant nothing. Humans had only been in space for 2 centuries. What possible military experience could they have? A few border skirmishes, maybe some light piracy suppression. Then I noticed the small text at the bottom of the card. Service record summary. Awards and commendations abbreviated into tiny codes. My translator implant struggled with some of the abbreviations, but it managed to pull up definitions from the Galactic Council's military database. Purple Heart. 3 awards. That was for being wounded in combat. 3 times. Bronze Star, 2 awards. Valor during military operations. There were 6 more abbreviations, each one cross-referencing to commendations for combat service, distinguished performance, and operational achievement. I felt something cold sliding down my spine. Thalrix, I said quietly. Access the Galactic Council military archives. Search for human military operations in the last 50 cycles. Commander. Thalrix's ear frills flattened in confusion. Just do it. While he worked, I kept reading. There was another section on the card, even smaller text, listing deployment history, locations and dates. Proxima conflict, Kepler Station defense, the Arcturus incident, New Hebrides campaign. Wait. The Arcturus incident. I knew that name. Every military officer in this sector knew that name. It was in the databases as one of the bloodiest conflicts in recent Galactic Council history, a mining station dispute that escalated into a full-scale battle involving 4 different species and over 60 ships. Over 60 ships entered that battle, 14 ships left. I looked at the human sitting calmly on my deck floor. Thalrix. I said, my voice coming out strangled. Tell me about human involvement in the Arcturus incident. Thalrex worked his console, his frills now fully flattened in distress. Commander, according to records, humans deployed 3 vessels to Arcturus. They were part of the Galactic Council peacekeeping force. The battle lasted 6 days. Human forces suffered 47% casualties, but held their assigned defense perimeter against overwhelming opposition. They were specifically credited with preventing a complete station collapse and civilian massacre. The cold feeling in my spine was spreading to my limbs now. New Hebrides campaign. I croaked. Look that one up too. More frantic typing. 18-month ground operation. Joint Species Task Force. Humans provided specialized infantry units. The campaign report lists them as having the highest mission success rate and the highest enemy engagement rate of any participating species. Highest enemy engagement rate. That was military speak for they killed the most people. I looked at the card again. Really looked at it this time. The issue date was 12 cycles ago. The deployment history covered 11 years. 11 years of continuous military operations across multiple conflict zones. How old are you? I asked the human. 34, Rebecca Torres said, still with that slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. 34 human years. She had been in active military service for a third of her entire life. She had been wounded in combat 3 times and kept going back. She had survived Arcturus where ships went to die, and I had just taken her hostage. Oh no, I whispered. Oh yes, she replied, and now her smile was definitely bigger. My hands were shaking. Actually shaking. A Kaldreth commander, 17 cycles of military service, 8 successful campaigns, decorated twice for tactical excellence, and my hands were shaking while holding a piece of plastic. Thalrex, I said, trying very hard to keep my voice steady. Cross-reference this service number with all available human military databases that the Galactic Council has on file. I heard the hesitation in his voice. Commander, are you certain you want me to do that right now? Do it. The bridge had gone very quiet. My crew was watching me, watching the human, trying to figure out why their commander was suddenly acting like he had just swallowed poison. Selprex, my weapons officer, still had her rifle pointed vaguely in the human's direction, but even she looked confused. The console beeped. Thalrex made a noise that I can only describe as a whimper. Commander, the record shows Lieutenant Commander Torres has completed 247 combat missions. She has been awarded field promotions twice. She has logged over 8,000 hours of combat zone operations. She has survived 4 ship destructions, 6 ground assaults, and participated in special operations classifications that are redacted from public records. 247 missions. I had completed 31 combat missions in my entire career, and I was considered highly experienced. What was her role in these operations? I asked, though I was absolutely certain I did not want to know the answer. According to this, she served as a combat logistics officer, which apparently means she coordinated supply lines and personnel transport in active war zones, but her record also shows certifications in advanced combat tactics, ship-to-ship boarding operations, explosive ordnance disposal, and something called close quarters battle instruction. She taught people how to fight in close quarters. She was a teacher of violence. I looked down at Rebecca Torres, who was still sitting cross-legged on my deck floor, looking relaxed and patient. The Proxima conflict, I said slowly. You were there. Oh yeah, she said, nodding. That was my second deployment, actually. Pretty rough. We lost a lot of good people at Proxima. I was just a junior lieutenant back then, running supply shuttles between the fleet and the ground forces. Got shot down twice in 1 week. Not my best performance, honestly. She said it like she was discussing a poor score in some recreational game. Not getting shot out of the sky twice. Kepler Station, I continued, my voice getting higher. The siege lasted 4 months. 70,000 defenders against 500,000 attackers. 5 months, actually, she corrected gently. And yeah, that one was tough. I was coordinating ammunition distribution during the final push. Barely slept for 3 weeks straight. But we held the station, so it worked out. It worked out. Kepler Station was studied in military academies across 12 species as an example of impossible defensive operations somehow succeeding. And she was there, coordinating ammunition, under siege, for 5 months. My mind flashed back to a briefing I had received, maybe 6 cycles ago, about human military doctrine. The intelligence officer had seemed almost apologetic when presenting the information, like he was embarrassed to even say it out loud. Humans, he had said, do not have a concept of acceptable losses in the same way we do. They have this cultural notion that they call never leave anyone behind. They will throw themselves into lethal situations to retrieve wounded soldiers. They will sacrifice strategic advantages to protect non-combatants. And somehow, impossibly, they often succeed anyway. At the time I had dismissed it as exaggeration. Species always talked up their own military capabilities. It was standard posturing. But now, looking at this human, this tiny, calm, smiling human who had been wounded 3 times and just kept going back to war zones, I understood. Humans were not posturing. They were just explaining facts. So, Rebecca Torres said conversationally, I noticed you guys disabled my ship. That is going to be a problem because I have a delivery deadline. I am supposed to drop off medical supplies at Research Station Gamma by Thursday, and if I miss that window, some very important doctors are going to be extremely upset with me. Medical supplies, I repeated numbly. Yeah, that is what I do now. Paperwork runs, mostly. Supply coordination for research stations and colony outposts. Boring stuff, really. But someone has to do it. And after 15 years of combat deployments, I figured I earned an easy assignment. Easy assignment. This was her easy assignment. I was going to die. We were all going to die. I made a decision right then, in that moment of absolute clarity that comes when you realize you have made a catastrophically stupid mistake. I was no longer a captor. I was a diplomat. A very apologetic, very desperate diplomat. Lieutenant Commander Torres, I said, setting the ID card down on the console very carefully, like it was an armed explosive device. I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding here today. She raised one eyebrow. Just one. The other stayed exactly where it was. How do humans even do that? A misunderstanding, she repeated, and I could hear the amusement in her voice now, clear as anything. Yes, I said quickly. You see, we believed your vessel to be an unregistered cargo transport operating in restricted space, a simple patrol error. These things happen. Sensors can be unreliable in this sector. Your sensors work fine, Thalrix muttered from his station. I shot him a look that promised terrible things for his career if he said another word. The point is, I continued, ignoring my traitorous sensor officer, we absolutely did not intend to detain a decorated United Earth Defense Force officer who was clearly engaged in legitimate humanitarian supply operations. This is quite frankly embarrassing for all of us. Rebecca Torres smiled, actually smiled. So I am not a hostage anymore? You were never a hostage, I said with as much dignity as I could manufacture. You were merely detained for routine identification verification, which you have now provided. We are very sorry for the inconvenience. You said I was a hostage, she pointed out, like specifically, you used that exact word, and something about ransom from my pathetic Earth government. Why do humans have such good memory for exact wording? A translation error, I said desperately. The word in our language, it translates poorly. What I actually meant was temporary guest pending verification. She said, standing up now and dusting off her jumpsuit, and pointing guns at temporary guests. That is standard procedure. Silpris, who still had her rifle sort of aimed in the human's direction, quickly lowered it and tried to look like she had just been casually holding it for no particular reason. We are very safety conscious, I tried. By now the rest of my bridge crew had pulled up the same military records that Thalrix had found, and I could see the realization spreading across their faces like a plague. Selprix's ear frills had gone completely white. Our navigation officer Krell was making a high-pitched wheeze that I think meant he was hyperventilating. Commander, Krell squeaked. She has more combat experience than our entire crew combined, including you. Thank you, Krell, for that helpful observation, I said through clenched teeth. Rebecca Torres was definitely trying not to laugh now. I could see her shoulders shaking slightly. Look, I said, spreading my hands in what I hoped was a peaceful, non-threatening gesture. Clearly we got off on the wrong foot here. Can we perhaps start over? I am Commander Vrelok, of the Razor Wing. We are, a legitimate patrol vessel ensuring trade route security in this sector. You are pirates, she said flatly. We prefer the term independent security contractors, I replied. You literally said you were going to ransom me. Again, translation issues. What I meant was we would facilitate your return to proper authorities through a mutually beneficial exchange of resources. She laughed. She actually laughed, right there on my bridge, and the sound made every single member of my crew flinch. Okay, Commander Vrelok, she said, still smiling. I appreciate the effort you are putting into this backpedaling routine. It is actually pretty entertaining. But here is the thing, I really do have a delivery deadline and I am already 3 hours behind schedule thanks to you guys shooting out my engines. We can repair that, I said immediately. Thalrix, get an engineering team over to her vessel right now. Full repairs, priority 1. We do not have the parts for human engine systems, Thalrix said quietly. Of course we did not. Why would we? Because I am an idiot. That is why. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of my engineering team carefully, nervously, desperately trying to repair a human engine core with parts that were not quite right and tools that were not quite the correct size, all while Rebecca Torres sat in our crew quarters drinking our best imported beverages and chatting pleasantly with my absolutely terrified staff about her various combat experiences. I heard later that she told them about the time she had to perform field repairs on a damaged transport shuttle while under active artillery fire and how she considered it good practice for staying calm under pressure. My crew members who heard that story requested immediate trauma counseling. When the repairs were finally complete, I personally escorted her back to her vessel. I wanted to make absolutely certain she left. More importantly, I wanted to make absolutely certain she left without filing any kind of incident report that might bring actual human military ships to this sector looking for explanations. Thank you for your cooperation during this unfortunate misunderstanding, I said formally as we stood in her cargo bay. No problem, she said, extending her hand in that weird human greeting gesture. I stared at it for a moment, then carefully touched it with my claw. She gripped briefly and shook. You know, this was actually kind of fun. Broke up an otherwise boring supply run, and your engineering team did solid work on my engines. Fun. She thought being taken hostage by pirates was fun. I hope the rest of your journey is, uneventful, I managed. Same to you, Commander, she said, climbing into her pilot seat. Oh, and hey, one more thing. I froze. Yes? My current assignment, the one I mentioned? I am actually the new logistics coordinator for the Earth Defense Force's Outer Rim expansion project, so you will probably be seeing more human vessels in this sector over the next few years. Just, fair warning, might want to update your target selection protocols. She smiled one more time, closed her airlock and fired up her engines. We watched her ship depart on our sensors, and I swear every single person on my bridge exhaled simultaneously when she finally jumped to faster than light travel. My report to High Command was brief and extremely edited. Routine patrol, encountered human transport, verified credentials, provided minor assistance with technical difficulties, proceeded with standard operations. No mention of hostages, no mention of panic, definitely no mention of the fact that I had accidentally captured someone who could probably have killed my entire crew with a fork and some determination. I also implemented a new protocol immediately distributed to every ship in our fleet. Before intercepting any vessel, scan for human life signs. If detected, verify identity and military status first. If military status confirmed, do not engage under any circumstances. Find literally anything else to do. Retire early if necessary. Because here is what I learned about humans that day. They do not brag about their combat experience. They do not posture or threaten or try to intimidate you with their capabilities. They just sit there calm and polite and friendly, while their identification card quietly informs you that they have personally participated in more violence than most species experience in a generation. And then they smile at you. Like it is all just part of a normal day. 17 cycles of military service, and I thought I understood fear. I was wrong. Fear is realizing you took a human soldier hostage, and she found it amusing. I put in for a transfer the next day, somewhere far from the Outer Rim, somewhere quiet, somewhere humans would never bother going. Apparently there is no such place anymore. They are everywhere now, spreading through the galaxy with their supply ships and their research stations and their terrifyingly casual attitudes about survival. My new career goal is simple. Avoid humans entirely. And if that becomes impossible, check their identification first, apologize profusely second, and flee immediately after. It is not dignified, but it is smart. And after meeting Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Torres, I have decided that being smart is significantly more important than being dignified.